Hi, I'm Rain101, and I'd like to welcome you to the inaugural episode of my new media studies series, Do They Fuck? We'll be taking a look at some of your favorite characters from pop culture media and attempt to answer the burning question that looms over every fictional pop culture personality in history. Are they good at the sex? And why, or why not? Now, I want to make it clear that the name is more than just, is this character sexually active ever? Because, those would be really short episodes. You probably clicked on this because you want to know if Luke Skywalker is good at the sex. And before we get into that, I want to explain why we're starting with Luke Skywalker, king of the accidentally incestuous patron saint of whiny bitches everywhere. I picked Luke because Luke as a character is complicated in all the right ways to help me illustrate how we're going to handle this question going forward. Because there's this Luke, but there's also this Luke. But there's also this Luke, and even this Luke, and about 1,000 other Lukes you've encountered since the character made his debut in '77, and they're all different characters, kinda. They have different histories, kinda, different futures for sure, and in the case of all of the extended universe canon, no future whatsoever. So how do we look at the multiverse of Luke Skywalkers and conclusively answer whether Luke Skywalker is a beast in the sack? Similarly, the answer is complicated because we don't get this Luke without this Luke. Now, this may disappoint some of you out there, but I'm going to be sticking to the hard canon when it comes to this analysis of Luke. Mostly. The original trilogy, the sequels, his appearance in Mandalorian, other established canon depictions of the character. Now, the hard canon even gets a little complicated sometimes. All the movies are canon, the cartoons are canon, the novelizations of those movies are canon, some comic books sometimes are canon and some aren't. Deleted scenes from movies sometimes are and sometimes aren't. Look, we're going to try and be sensible about this, okay? Though I'm a massive nerd, particularly when it comes to Star Wars, I have not consumed every piece of Star Wars media that exists because there's a lot of it, and frankly, a lot of it sucks. But that doesn't mean I'm going to ignore how that soft canon influences the hard canon and how that influence impacts the character. This is a media studies series, so, whatever. Hopefully it makes sense by the end. Fuck it. Who gives a shit about any of that? The real reason we're here is simple. Luke Skywalker, hero of the rebellion, redeemer of Vader, one of the most powerful Jedi Masters in history. Does he fuck? Is he a first ballot candidate for Chancellor of the Bone Zone? Or would his lovers call for a vote of no confidence in the Jedi Master? When we first meet Luke, he's a whiny, bratty little teenager from some backwater planet. He's never been anywhere. He's never done anything. The highlight of his life up to this point is hanging out at Tashi Station, tinkering with droids and aircraft with his pal Biggs, and dreaming of someday escaping the dreariness of farming moisture in the desert with his aunt and uncle. The version we meet in A New Hope doesn't fuck. He might not even know what fucking is. Like many teenage townies wasting away in backwater towns hoping for their ticket out, when we first meet Luke, he's naive, ignorant, whiny, overconfident, and frustrated. Sexually, we can assume, and otherwise. But honestly, that's fine, right? Who hasn't been that whiny teenager? You're stuck at home, you're dreaming of getting your life in gear and meeting your destiny. And most of us wind up just getting a shitty job and moving into a terrible apartment with an atrocious roommate and regretting the day we ever decided to give up the comforts of living rent-free in our parents' basements. Luke's path to forced adulthood went a different direction.
Uncle Owen! Aunt Beru! Uncle Owen!
One that led him into the rebellion and into the annals of galactic history. And so, okay, great. Luke, you moved out of the house. In a sense, you got a good job with an up-and-coming startup that's really starting to take off. You got a little confident. You've taken your first steps into a larger world. And then that world rises up to meet you and shows you that it's bigger than you ever dreamed, bolder than you ever imagined, and more than capable of handing you your skinny ass. You make some friends, you definitely make some enemies. You take some losses, you gain some humility. You're in your 20s, dude. That's when this kind of thing is supposed to happen. And his relationship to romance in A New Hope is complicated and weird and kind of icky. It's evident in retrospect that in writing A New Hope, George wasn't aware that Vader was Luke's father and that Leia was his twin sister. The script went through a lot of revisions. We'll get to that in a minute. But in A New Hope, Luke clearly has some kind of hots for Leia. After the crew escapes from the Death Star and are making their way to Yavin 4, Luke asks, "So what do you think of her, Han?" Han replies, "I'm trying not to, kid." Luke happily and a little smugly replies, "Good." Han, being Han, has to poke him a little bit. "So you think the princess and a guy like me?" And Luke is like, "Absolutely not, dude. That's horseshit. Don't. Nope. No, I don't think so at all. That would be, why would you even think that?" Luke has a bit of a crush and is expressing it in that mopey dopey high school way that Han can only laugh at. Han clearly does not feel threatened by Luke, despite clearly having a thing for Leia himself, because Han Solo absolutely fucks like no one's business. But does Luke fuck? That's the question we're here to answer. Can you stop thinking about Han Solo for like 3 fucking seconds? Luke is pretty clearly coded as being down with the ladies in A New Hope, with Lucas attempting to set up a little tension between Luke and Han for Leia's affections. This would be played on, kind of, in the sequel, but at the time Lucas wrote this, The Empire Strikes Back was anything but an inevitability. A New Hope was an unlikely success, to say the least, because Lucas was an anti-studio, independent filmmaker with a limited but well-regarded filmography under his belt, but also because A New Hope was a complete clusterfuck of a film that was saved blissfully in editing by his then-wife Marcia, along with Richard Chew and Paul Hirsch, who sifted through literally miles of film to create the cut that we know and love today. And Lucas generally had the plot for Star Wars devised before 1977, but it went through extensive rewrites, even as far as making major character decisions during production of A New Hope. Did you know Obi-Wan dies, right? Obi-Wan's sacrifice happens because Lucas didn't have anything to do with him in the finale? To say that Lucas's vision for Star Wars was spotty at best in 77 would be generous. He was flying by the seat of his pants, and clearly the idea of Luke and Han being rivals for Leia's affections would be long gone by Empire Strikes Back. It's clear that some time has passed since Luke's triumphant destruction of the Death Star over Yavin 4. The Empire is still large and in charge, despite the massive setback endured in the first film. The rebellion is small, underpowered, and on the run. According to the official canon, Hoth occurs 3 or so years after the destruction of the first Death Star, and in all that time, Han and Leia have developed some kind of tension. Though their relationship seems friendly and professional as near as we can tell, at least from the start, it's only as Han is about to leave to clear the bounty on his head that this tension comes to a head, with Han pressing the issue after Leia's cold response to his leaving, possibly forever. Look, it's not about Han, it's not about Han, it's not about Han, it's not about Han. Anyway, the infamous kiss. Due to circumstances and stuff, Han can't quite get out the door, and he continues to press the issue with Leia, and Luke is kind of there. He doesn't seem to be happy that they're fighting. There's no like, "Oh yeah, my romantic rival's getting put in his place" weirdness. If anything, Luke seems pretty indifferent to the whole thing. A generous interpretation of Hamill's wisely not stealing focus in this important scene that is not about him would be that he's a little sad to see his friends kind of arguing and bickering like this. Luke clearly has a lot of love for both of them, a love and care that is clearly reciprocated by both characters and evidenced by their concern for Luke's safety, and in Han's case, willingness to risk his own life to protect his friend. In any case, Leia is frustrated by Han's Han-ness and just lays one on Luke, and it is clearly just meant to piss Han off. And Luke doesn't like lean into it or anything, and even his kind of smug, smiling satisfaction, right? It seems more directed at Han than any genuine belief that Leia is into him or there's some kind of romantic feeling there. This seems like the kind of back and forth between the three of them is kind of common, if not to this extreme. Luke seems a bit shocked, though, at Han's terse reaction to all this, as if to say, like, hey, bro, I thought we were just goofing around. Where are you going? The next time they see each other, though, it's whatever awkwardness or tension one might feel after a situation like that is completely gone. Their relationship is clearly bigger and stronger than that. And there's a lot that goes unsaid because it's clearly understood by both of them. In the last 3 years, they've grown, and they've grown together. There's no hard feelings. I'm not after your girl, man. I just want to make sure my friends are okay. Luke, in Empire, as well as the finale of the trilogy, Return of the Jedi, just doesn't seem to be that interested in romance. Now, there's been a lot of discussion all over the place about whether Luke is gay, and Mark Hamill famously said that Luke's sexuality is open-ended, open to interpretation, and that any of those interpretations are all equally valid, which is awesome and inclusive and literally allows any and everyone to identify with and feel somewhat represented by Luke. And honestly, for Luke, being gay might kind of be the best case option because the rebellion is a total sausage fest. Like, there are no women. Okay, look, there's Leia, there's this lady in the command center, and there's some woman in the hangar as the rebellion transports make their escape. But seriously, this rebellion is a bunch of white dudes with mustaches. Anyone who cries foul about the sequels being like, too woke because they have like women and people of color, as if that is somehow unrealistic and ridiculous, like, go back and look at how genuinely ridiculous and unrepresentative of humanity the OT rebellion is. Adding one woman to the resistance is like a 33% increase in representation compared to the rebellion we see in Empire Strikes Back. And adding people of color is an incalculable increase because you cannot multiply by 0. Anyway, whether Luke is gay, straight, bi, pan, whatever, it doesn't seem like a thing he's interested in, at least in the time that we spend with him during the duration of the films. If Luke once had the hots for Leia, that attraction has clearly subsided. And that's the only time, canonically, we see Luke express any attraction to anyone else. And it's not like Lucas or Lawrence Kasdan are afraid to include a romantic subplot in Star Wars. I mean, Han and Leia's love story is classic. It becomes integral to their characters' motivations and growth in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Not presenting a love interest for Luke is a choice, whether one made to, I think, wisely serve the character and the narrative, or simply because they just couldn't fit one in. And, you know, I feel like J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson could learn a thing or two about how to build a compelling narrative without shoehorning in an unnecessary romance by looking at the choices made with Luke in the original trilogy. And you know what? I'm really glad that I said this and made this video on the internet before they started production on the sequels, because, could you imagine if they didn't learn this lesson and did shoehorn in, like, unnecessary romance over and over and over and over again to the detriment of, like, every character and the entire plot and the franchise of Star Wars as a whole? Anyway, Luke, Empire Strikes Back. I would argue that at the end of Empire, Luke is probably still a virgin. I mean, he's making moves out there in the world, but he's kind of married to his work. And when he has time, he's kind of consumed by his hobbies, which can be a great way to meet people, get some life experience. But when you're the only person who even knows your hobby exists, and your hobby is training in the tradition of a monastic and celibate religious order, and your job is literally your entire life otherwise, you're probably going to have a slightly difficult time sowing your oats. I mean, okay, look, he smooches the Foxy Princess, but that's not about him. It's about his best friend. And let's just talk about the Jedi for a second. Can we do that? Look, I know I say he's training in the ways of the Jedi, but in Empire Strikes Back, he's been kind of left to his own devices. He seems to be genuinely confused seeing the apparition of Obi-Wan Kenobi as he's dying on Hoth, and later wonders whether he dreamed up the whole thing. There's at least one instance outside of the films where Obi-Wan reaches out to Luke, warning him that Leia is in danger when she's like off on a mission, but otherwise Luke's training has kind of come from experience. There is one canon instance of Luke training at a Jedi temple between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and that's to practice deflecting lightsaber blasts with remotes. And there is an instance where he confronts Vader, And it is one of the coldest and most badass Vader moments that everyone should see, where Luke yells like, "You killed my father!" And Vader is like, "Yo, I've killed a lot of people's fathers. You're gonna have to be a little more specific, kid." And just fucks Luke up. Seriously, go read Marvel's 2015 Star Wars comics. If you haven't already, they're so good. Anyway, the point is, what we know of the Jedi Order, particularly its views on relationships and celibacy, come from the prequels. And whether Lucas had envisioned the Jedi as this order of ascetic monks sworn to celibacy as far back as 1980 is honestly anyone's guess. But in the original trilogy, we're never told that the Jedi are celibate. We're never even told that they're really monks. In fact, we don't learn a ton about the Jedi of the Old Republic at all through the films. We do learn indirectly about the danger of forming attachments and how those attachments can lead to suffering. The Jedi philosophy is rooted in Buddhism, and Luke's conversation with Yoda and Obi-Wan on Dagobah is a great example of showing, not telling. Neither Yoda nor Obi-Wan say, "Oh, well, the Jedi teach that." No. It's evident. It's on display. If you let your attachments cloud your judgment, if you can't keep aware of the big picture because of your connection to your friends, you risk this whole enterprise. You're putting the entire fate of the galaxy in danger. Hello? Just get up here then, dude. Nothing's stopping you. Come on. So does Luke know that the Jedi don't bone? It never comes up. No one ever mentions it. It doesn't come up in the films. It doesn't come up in the extended canon like any of the comic books or books. Luke is perfectly capable of forming attachments, building relationships, and connecting with people, but he has zero canon romantic or sexual connections. It is possible that Luke becomes aware of the monastic lifestyle of the Jedi and in his practice seeks to emulate it. It's equally possible that that's just not a big priority for Luke, that his desire to serve the rebellion and train as a Jedi leaves no time for him to pursue romance. But at the same time, he's 19 when he blows up the first Death Star. He's 22 in Empire Strikes Back and 23 when he confronts the Emperor on the second Death Star. Like, look, I remember being 19, 20, 21 years old. I was attending college. I was working full time. I was getting involved in theater. I was playing a lot of Halo 2 and then 3 and Final Fantasy 11, posting religiously on all sorts of message boards, IRC chat rooms. Look, I was a weird little introvert nerd, okay? And I was juggling a lot just to stay afloat. And I still managed to find time for a pretty sparse sex life during those years. And here's Luke, who is handsome and powerful and connected and widely respected. He's a hero in the Rebel Alliance, and yeah, his identity remains secret from the Empire for a while, but he's a motherfucking galactic celebrity. And all this, he just never hooks up with anyone. It's never mentioned. Sex and romance are just not a part of his life, near as anyone can tell. And all of this without any knowledge of the teachings and tenets of the old Jedi Order. And by the time we see Luke again in Return of the Jedi, he has thrown himself hard into his work. He is a Jedi Knight, and he's a man with a plan. He makes Boba Fett look like an absolute chump. Shows up on Tatooine, rescues Han, defeats Jabba the Hutt. Like, this is prime time for him to kick back, hang out with his friends, celebrate, find a little honey to cozy up with. You know, I mean, like, nope. He's back to hanging out with his goofy old hermit friend, the only other person in the galaxy into his weird little hobby. And then that guy immediately dies. So he ain't meeting anyone. There's not a ton of stuff that happens in the canon between Empire Strikes Back and Jedi. There's only a year between the two movies. Luke does go do some stuff. He learns more about the Force. Somewhere in there, he gets a hand-me-down lightsaber from this ancient Jedi temple, then puts together his own lightsaber that we see, the green one, in Return of the Jedi. And that's an important part of any Padawan's journey towards becoming a Jedi Knight. Canonically, when it comes to the Force and the Jedi and all that stuff, he's still on his own in that year between the films. He intuits most of his further training and development. In fact, he's not actually instructed on how to make a lightsaber. He's only able to do so thanks from having studied his father's lightsaber and the lightsaber he later recovers from the Jedi Temple. His connection to the Force and his ability to wield it as a Jedi are almost entirely intuitive. All of this is to say that Luke, at least as we see him in the original trilogy, does not undergo the rigorous training and dogmatic indoctrination that other Jedi historically experienced. But Luke still, again, does not seem to be interested in the slightest in sex, romance, anything other than protecting his friends, serving the rebellion, and becoming a powerful Jedi Knight. And look, before you get your pitchforks out or anything like that, I am not trying to say that one has to fuck to have a happy, fulfilling, or worthwhile life. You can be sexually celibate your entire life and absolutely live in completely dignified, blissful peace. Like, if Luke is happy to hang out with friends, focus on his business and his passions, more power to him. The point of this series is not to dunk on people who aren't interested in sex or don't have sex or anything like that, right? But near as we can tell, outside of that one moment with a woman who would turn out to be his sister, we never see Luke express sexual attraction, any kind of preference, any kind of attraction towards any life form in the entire galaxy. And Mark Hamill, in his assertion that Luke could be gay or bi or pan or whatever, made the explicit point that Luke should be judged by his character and not who he loves. And Mark, I wholeheartedly agree. The point of the series is not who he loves, but how he loves. And as far as we see in the original trilogy, Luke's love is strictly platonic. So okay, time passes in the universe and in our inferior meat space. The canon of Star Wars expands massively, confusingly, and then collapses, millions of voices crying out in terror and then suddenly being made non-canon. In the expanded universe now called Legends Continuity, after Disney took it over, Luke became this transcendental figure, this wise, sage, immensely powerful and capable Jedi Master. And in Timothy Zahn's excellent Thrawn trilogy, we're introduced to Mara Jade, a sexy and dangerous assassin sent to kill Luke, and she ultimately falls in love with and then marries Luke Skywalker. Their relationship is seen by many as a major part of Luke's development as a character in the post-films world. And Mara Jade is massively popular and super well known in the fandom. You can play as her in the much maligned Mysteries of the Sith expansion to Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, and that came out in 99 or something like that. I mean, she's been around for a really long time. George Lucas often collaborated with EU projects and lent authors, artists, and others insight into the history and future of the universe he had created. But he wasn't super hands-on. He gave general direction while not necessarily letting the extended universe impact the way he saw the world. But Lucas specifically really did not like Mara Jade. Lucas had planned on exploring Luke's love life in episodes 7 through 9, which he'd begun planning as early as the original drafts of A New Hope, and certainly was discussing in broad strokes in the late 80s. In a 1988 interview with Starlog magazine, Luke was asked, "Why didn't Luke get a girl?" To which Lucas responded, "You haven't seen the last 3 yet." Lucas clearly intended to do more films in the Star Wars universe, and clearly went the route of the prequels rather than the direct sequels. And sure, there was an intention to develop Luke outside of his relationships to his family and friends as far back as 1988. But as soon as the expanded universe took off, one of the big questions was immediately asked and answered. Yeah, Luke fucks. And he's super good at it. Good enough to turn a dark side, force-sensitive assassin back from the dark side and convince her to train as a Jedi. And then she becomes a Jedi Master in her own right. And yet Lucas hated Mara Jade. Though the prequels had not been made yet, Lucas had already conceived of the Jedi as akin to these Buddhist monks, including the abstinence from sex and romantic attachments. Luke and Mara Jade's romance and marriage didn't line up with Lucas's conception of the Jedi. But the hard canon is influenced by the soft canon nearly as much as the other way around. I mean, did you know Kashyyyk, the Wookiee homeworld, was named in extended universe canon and then later made hard canon in the prequels? Timothy Zahn's Grand Admiral Thrawn, a fantastic and immensely popular character, was made canon in Rebels and clearly appears to be a major character in Dave Filoni's mind, being referenced by Ashoka in The Mandalorian. Especially now, with the franchise taken out of Lucas's hands, everything I'm saying might be moot in the future due to a comic book, TV episode, or film contradicting all of it by reintroducing Mara Jade into the canon as they explore the tons of time between Return of the Jedi and the destruction of Luke's temple prior to The Force Awakens. Mara Jade is a popular character. Who knows what might happen? The extended universe soft canon definitely informs Luke from The Mandalorian. This motherfucker is strong, he is sexy, he is confident, he is a goddamn Jedi Master. He moves swiftly, deliberately, precisely, with poise and grace and deadly calm. And then that violence is over as quickly as it arises, and we meet a Luke who is dignified, peaceful, who exudes both power and refinement, the fist meeting the palm in perfect balance. This is the Luke we got to see in the extended universe legacy canon. The Luke everybody wanted in the sequels. And this Luke fucks. Like, holy shit. This Luke absolutely fucks. But does he? He's out here traveling the galaxy. He's looking for these Force-sensitive kids to train. He's rebuilding a Jedi Order that once presided over the galaxy for like 1,000 generations. The Luke that is confident, self-actualized, truly at the peak of his capabilities, seems genuinely to be a human being that has transcended the affairs of mortals and the temptations of the flesh. Would this Luke be great in bed? Most def. He'd be a doting, passionate, attentive lover, willing to explore your wildest passions, but always respecting your boundaries. You'd have a safe word with this Luke, and you'd never need to say it, because he could intuit your comfort and react to your needs before you ever express them. But damn, this also feels like the Luke that's least likely to make the jump to hyperspace with anyone, and we were already kind of iffy on that in the first place. And then there's this thing. Sequel Luke. This is the dreary, bitter, cynical Luke Skywalker who has turned his back on the Force, turned his back on all attachments whatsoever. His education as a Jedi was non-traditional in the first place, but his understanding of the dangers of attachments was always there. He didn't have it like dogmatically drilled into his head the same way as the Old Republic Jedi Order, and Yoda and Obi-Wan never discouraged his affection or his attachment for his friends, but at the same time, he straight up told an Empire, like, hey dude, if you go and rescue your friends instead of completing your training, you're gonna fuck everything up. And Luke does it anyway, and then fucks everything up, and everyone in the galaxy is put in grave danger. And when he goes to confront Vader, right, like, if it weren't for the Force intervening, or more accurately or likely the writers backing themselves into a corner and having to kind of luck their way out, Luke either joins Vader and joins the dark side, or he dies, leaving no one to oppose Vader and the Emperor and cementing the Empire's grip on the galaxy. If he doesn't get sucked into that like exhaust vent or reach out to Leia, like, the galaxy loses. That's it. What, are they going to go train Leia? She doesn't even know who Obi-Wan is, barely. She never met Yoda. Like, what? You can't do that. So anyway, out of fear of repeating history in the Skywalker bloodline leading to all this evil and death and misery and stuff, Luke tries to avoid it and then causes all of those things to occur anyway. His recklessness and impulsivity when it comes to his attachments repeatedly, like his entire life, causes everything to fall to pieces. And so he just fuck it. He cuts it all off, severs all attachments, including to the Force, hermiting himself away on this tiny little island where he can no longer cause devastation through his reckless and short-sighted behavior that leads to these amazing, incredible, disastrous failures. And look, by this point, Luke for damn sure knows about the tenets of the old Jedi Order. He has spent decades now scouring the galaxy for teachings and lore. He discovers Jakastanu's collection of Jedi holocrons. He discovers Force-sensitive youth, begins training and rebuilding the Jedi Order. By the time we see him at the end of The Force Awakens, he is for sure aware of the monastic code of the Jedi, all of the dogma surrounding attachment and relationships, the training retinue, the hierarchy of like younglings, Padawan knights, and masters, all that sort of stuff. And whatever our ultimate verdict is on Luke, This Luke does not fuck, okay? Even if he did, this Luke comes in like 3 minutes and then cries and apologizes, and you're kind of like, oh, poor guy, he's been through a lot, but he's kind of sweet, and maybe you could like work through some of this stuff with him, but he like never calls you back, and you're like, what's his deal? But he's just like so ashamed of himself, and that self-loathing just builds up, and he assumes that you loathe him as much as he loathes himself. It's just a disaster, and this Luke sucks, okay? And this is not a guy you want to fuck. And he doesn't want to either. He doesn't want attachments. He doesn't want friends or family or love or any of that shit. He wants to be left alone. He wants to just stew in his failures until the universe forgets all about him, all about the Jedi, all about devoting yourself to anything, all about the Force, all that shit. And by the time of The Last Jedi, he's done with the Jedi too. He figures out, look, the rigid, dogmatic, arrogant later days of the Jedi Order caused them to completely misunderstand themselves, their role in the galaxy. I mean, the fucking Force itself. He spent his whole life wanting to become a Jedi, but he didn't really know what that meant, like historically, like for real. He understood the Jedi as these, brave, powerful defenders of the light, using their ability for the good of others, selflessly defending those who could not defend themselves. And it turns out they were a bunch of fucking politicians, right? They were concerned with their own interest, their dogma, and completely lost track of their original creed and motivation. Now, Luke is a Jedi. He is like the platonic ideal in so many ways. And he would have made a terrible Jedi in the days of the Old Republic, and probably would have went down the same path as his father if he had been indoctrinated into their order in that way. In rejecting the teachings of the Jedi, it stands to reason that Luke would also reject the dogma of attachment, of romance or sex being this dangerous temptation that must be avoided. He rightfully points out that this is exactly the kind of thinking that led to Anakin's turn to the dark side and ultimately the destruction of this ancient order that had protected the galaxy for like thousands of years. So then why doesn't Luke fuck? Well, okay, when I first told my partner who the subject of this video would be, she was like, oh yeah, no, he absolutely does not fuck. And I was like, yeah, he is not good at sex. But he should be. I mean, he's powerful, he's attractive, he's kind, he's competent, he's loyal. He has all of these really attractive qualities. And we both just kind of knew that all of his overthinking about all the wrong things, his whininess, his self-doubt, all of these things would get in the way of his potential. I joked that Last Jedi Luke was an incel, and I was like, Luke could rebuild the Jedi if he weren't such a bitch about it. And I imagined him lamenting that Force users just want to be trained by shitty Jedi Masters and not enlightened gentlemen like me who see through the lies of the Jedi. I thought it was like a good, kind of lighthearted take on the character, but honestly, the more I thought about it, the more I realized it's not a good take. And not only that, it's not even the most interesting one. An incel is someone who styles themselves as involuntarily celibate, and with all the nonsense and honestly at times grave real-world consequence that comes with that misguided and dangerous line of thinking. No, I don't think that Luke is involuntarily celibate. And you might have sussed it out for yourself by now, but I think far more interesting is the idea that Luke is ace. I think he's asexual, aromantic. I'm hardly the first person to consider this, but I have not seen it brought up outside of ace communities, and that's still based admittedly on a cursory Google search. I'm not ace myself, I'm not aro myself, and so there might be takes like this out there that exist that I haven't seen. But as far as like kind of mainstream representation of Luke and who he is and might be, I just have never seen or heard this before, and I think it's kind of interesting. When I went to write this video for a series called Do They Fuck, I mean, I did not actually expect myself to take the question this literally, but that's where it led us. That's where we are. Now, as I mentioned before, the Jedi have some pretty specific views on attachment that are very similar to Buddhist monastic tradition, and the Jedi are very clearly modeled very closely on that same tradition. And in the canon, that tradition has been looked at from a lot of different angles. Anakin's romantic attachment leads to his downfall, but Obi-Wan canonically has a relationship with the Queen of Mandalore that was so strong and meaningful that he would have walked away from the Jedi Order for her. In Buddhist traditions, human attachments to the material world through material possessions, but also emotional attachments to others and even yourself, and even kind of the concept, whatever. Our primary sources of suffering, all right? Attachment causes pain, causes suffering. And for Anakin, this is definitely true. And even Obi-Wan suffers as a direct result of his connection to others, including allowing Vader to live rather than ending his misery and saving the galaxy a world of pain, violence, and death as he's like burning next to the lava on Mustafar. And though Luke is not raised in this tradition, he seems to ultimately live up to that monastic ideal as far as romance and sexuality are concerned. It's not that Jedi dogma and tradition don't apply to him. It's that it doesn't seem like it has to. Luke just never expresses any romantic or sexual desire at any point in the hard canon. And part of why Hamill can say that Luke may or may not be gay is that Luke may or may not be anything, because it's never a side of the character we see or even consider. Han's relationship with Leia and the influence they have on another is a major motivator for these characters. It's not like romance and sexuality are not important in Star Wars. They are. They're just not important to Luke. Look, Luke reminds me of a lot of historical figures who were lifelong celibates. Immanuel Kant, Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, and tons of Greek, Roman philosophers, numerous prominent monks and religious figures all throughout time. As my partner put it, ideally, celibacy isn't punitive or a sacrifice in which you have to cut off your relationships with those you love. It's just a natural consequence of devoting yourself to a higher purpose and being made complete in other ways. Undistracted, unfettered by longing or dissatisfaction or possessiveness, his asexuality even potentially is the linchpin that separated him from Jedi like Anakin and keeps him from being tempted to the dark side. And I think there's real merit to this. Mark Hamill recalls in a conversation about how Luke was handled in the sequels that in reading the Return of the Jedi script, he expected more exploration of Luke's dark side, his temptations. He shows up wearing all black, and when we first see him is teased as maybe being a darker version of the character. He's hooded. He force chokes Gamorrean guards at Jabba's palace. I mean, like, this Luke is kind of scary. And a lot of extended universe material explores Luke's temptations from the dark side, with the Dark Horse comic series Dark Empire explicitly pushing Luke into the dark side before redeeming him and pulling him back into the light. Luke in the extended universe falls in love with Mara Jade, who is the hand of the Emperor, and he eventually marries her. At the same time, his monastic devotion to the Force, the Jedi, the rebuilding of the Jedi as peacekeepers and servants, all of that stuff never falters either. And when we consider what are basically alternate timeline stories now, it feels like these explorations are more like what-if comics than real explorations of Luke. They kind of attempt to humanize Luke, bring him down to earth, explore his humanity and imperfections, but is that really what Luke is? Is that what he represents? I would argue that Luke's journey from whiny townie to Jedi Master is about finding perfection in balance, finding the middle path, becoming the Buddha. He achieves enlightenment. This is what the sequels absolutely miss about the character. And look, I can see why Rian Johnson did what he did. He was trying to tell a new story. He wasn't trying to rehash the same old ground that's been done and done and done again. But it still misses what's important about the character's journey and what makes that journey so special and meaningful to millions, billions maybe, of people. Luke teaches us that any of us can be swayed by the dark side, and that all of us have the ability to resist it, to see through the immediate, the temporary, the emotions and attachments that cloud our judgment, and be the best version of ourselves. It doesn't matter who we are, who we love, how we engage with romance and sexuality, if we even do it all. We can still be excellent to ourselves, excellent to the world that we live in. We can be Jedi ourselves, no matter how hard the path may be. I think the most compelling moment for Luke is at the end of Return of the Jedi, when Vader realizes he has a twin sister and Luke lets go. He gives all of his anger and hatred and fear and just lets it out on Vader and just wails on him, chops his hand off. And then he realizes, this is it. Here's the moment. He remembers the lesson of the cave. In Empire Strikes Back, he sees Vader's chopped off hand and sees his own hand that Vader chopped off and starts to see that he could become just like his father. And he makes the choice. He throws away his lightsaber. And he says, it'll never stop getting me. I'm a Jedi like my father before me. Who doesn't want to be Luke in that moment? Who doesn't want to be that version of themselves? So anyway, does Luke fuck? Probably not. But if he did, you want to catch the Jedi Master Mandalorian Luke, that dude is going to blow your fucking mind. But I don't think he would want to. And does he need to for us to appreciate him as a character? If there's anything I want to do with this series, it's look at the way that media portrays sex, sexuality, and how that portrayal influences how we see sex and sexuality. And by extension, the influence that characters in media have on our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. And yeah, make some silly jokes along the way. What does it say that one of the most well-known, beloved, inspirational, and influential characters in the history of film and pop culture might be asexual, might be aromantic, might just not be interested in any of that? What does that mean for the stories that we can tell? And the stories that we allow ourselves to tell? And the stories that haven't been told because somebody said that won't sell without any sex? So, no, Luke doesn't fuck. And that's great. It's arguably a huge part of what makes him so resolved and so powerful. And look, if you're disappointed in that, and you just absolutely have to have someone in your Star Wars who fucks, there's always Jar Jar. Thank you for watching. If you're still here, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to my channel. Turn the notifications on. It supports me and the channel so much. If you want to make it easier for content like this to hit your little earballs, you can support me financially at patreon.com/Rain101. You can find that link plus other socials and all that bullshit down in the down below part. Thank you so much, everybody who supports me by watching, by supporting me on Patreon and on Twitch. You constantly motivate me and inspire me to come up with these crazy ideas and allow me to share them with you and the rest of the world. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.